Hey, good morning, everyone. Good. All right. Making sure that everyone online can also see us. Okay. So welcome to our conference, the second Trump administration opportunities and challenges for the United States, for U.S. Southeast Asian relations. Sorry. It's too early in the morning. My name is Lien-Hang Nguyen, and I'm the 12th and current director of the Weatherhead East Asian Institute at Columbia University, as well as the Dorothy Borg Associate Professor in the History of the United States and East Asia here in the History Department. So before I begin, I'd like to thank our co-sponsors and co-hosts of this event, which is the Journalism School, and my good friend Nguyen, who is the Vice Dean of Academic Affairs here at the Journalism School, and also my other co-sponsors, including China and the World. Yes, woohoo! There's Tom and Daniel, as well as the New York Southeast Asian Network, and I see all of the co-organizers, co-principals here. So the four of us, along with the Weatherhead East Asian Institute, are co-sponsor and co-hosting this event. But the biggest thanks goes out to Professor Anne Marie Murphy, whose hard work and long-standing commitment to the study of Southeast Asia really responsible for why we are all here today. And I also want to mention that Anne Marie has just edited a brand new book right here, Southeast Asia Views, the United States Perceptions, Policies, and Prospects, which really could not be more timely. It's always Anne-Marie who's always on the cutting edge and getting these great edited volumes out first and foremost. So this is a comprehensive collection of Southeast Asian perspectives on the region's dealings with the United States. And in a different era, it might have gotten some attention from the incoming U.S. administration, but we'll just hope that there are some who are reading and will read. Anne-Marie's book has its origins in an 8-week virtual conference that were co-sponsored by NICEAN back during the pandemic. Anne-Marie organized the project because she was tired of seeing discussions of U.S. policy towards Southeast Asia framed solely in terms of U.S. strategic interests. As a result, her book showcases 8 Southeast Asian contributors rather than just American scholars, all of whom bridge academia and foreign policy circles, not just in their own countries, but in Southeast Asia more broadly. So I'm just going to do this too, because we're calling out all of our kind of community family members, calling out particularly alumni where possible. And so there's also Paul Busberet. I'm a little blind here without Paul is not here yet. 6:30 to 9. We were just all together in Bangkok. So one of the things that I was saying, just reflecting upon my own where I was when Trump was elected back in the fall, and then moving into the inauguration. I was first in Vietnam and then in Thailand. So spent most of this time period in the election and the transition in Southeast Asia, collecting a lot of different perspectives. And Paul was there in Bangkok a few weeks ago. He was a postdoctoral fellow here at Weatherhead, and he also has a chapter in this book that Anne-Marie will autograph for me, and I'll get others who are contributors. So for those of you who don't know us, the Weatherhead East Asian Institute at Columbia was founded in 1949 in the aftermath of World War II, and really to help the United States confront the challenges of the onset of the Cold War in the region. For several actually of our founding members helped shape U.S. the diplomatic policy towards Asia during and after the war. So they really knew firsthand the importance of understanding the cultures, languages, and histories of the countries of the United States was now engaging with. And they also recognized the need for a place to transmit that knowledge to younger generations. So that's still happening today, more than 75 years later. So today, though, our focus has now extended far beyond China, Japan, and Korea. It also includes Inner Asia, and especially of particular importance, Southeast Asia. Our commitment to the study of Southeast Asia extends back decades. Since 1991, we've offered fellowships to support graduate students conducting field work and also internships in the region. In the years after 1991, a distinguished group of Southeast Asian studies experts organized themselves without the guidance of a chair or academic leader. There was no one who was dedicated to teaching Southeast Asian studies at Columbia at this time, basically into a strong community of visiting faculty, research scholars, and postdoctoral fellows who've really become now a vital part of our network. And then it was in 1998 that we finally launched the Masters of Arts in Regional Studies, Studies. This is an East Asia program, but we hope to, again, really strengthen our offerings in our master's program with regard to Southeast Asia. In 2015, in tandem with Anne-Marie, we became a founding member of NICEAN. And as many of you probably know, the network, NICEAN, is a community of professors, students, journalists, and policymakers who are committed to putting Southeast Asia into the worldwide conversation and inspiring, again, the next generation of scholars and leaders. So today, one of the things that we really wanted to shine focus on, and because we were so inspired by the conference that our postdoctoral fellow, Ayuvi, where's Ayuvi Teraka? There you are, who is unfortunately leaving us after 2 great years, a conference that she put on that looked at sort of U.S. Japan relations in the aftermath of the Trump election. And this really inspired Anne-Marie, who was thinking along those same lines, to have something like this for Southeast Asia, as we do when we look at U.S. Southeast Asian relations. So this is, I think, in many ways, a series of great conferences that the Weatherhead East Asian Institute, working with our partners, would like to put on an annual basis. So it builds on, again, some of these earlier programs that we put on, but you're going to see that we're going to really dive deep with the experts that we have and we've invited today. So without much further ado, I want to turn over the podium to Anne-Marie. And again, welcome. We're going to have a really great conference over the span of today and the panels that you'll see. Anne-Marie?
All right. Well, thank you very much, Hang, for that kind introduction. I am thrilled to welcome you all here today to this conference on the future of Southeast Asian U.S. relations under the second Trump administration. And I only wish that it wasn't happening against the backdrop of the administration's wholesale assault against academic inquiry that has hit international education, Asian studies, and the Weatherhead East Asian Institute particularly hard. The closure of the International and Foreign Language Office of the Department of Education has led to the suspension of Fulbright scholarships and threatens the foreign language and area studies programs that provide linguistic training, dissertation support for graduate students, and overseas research funding for scholars of all ranks that is critically important for understudied regions of the world like Southeast Asia. As someone who benefited from the Foreign Language Area Studies programs, FLAS, and Fulbright scholarships, it's really difficult for me to envision how I could have become a Southeast Asian expert without that support. The Trump administration's cancellation of the Weatherhead East Asian Institute's National Resource Center grant is a blow to one of the country's leading Asian studies centers, forcing Weatherhead to notify its scholars, instructors, and partners working on NRC grants to terminate their work. Weatherhead is extremely fortunate that it has other funding sources, and under Hang's leadership has been able to shift salaries to other budgets and otherwise uphold the commitments to individuals of the Weatherhead community, and we are all grateful for her leadership in that regard. The Trump administration's misguided policies will negatively impact national security, economic prosperity, and U.S. engagement with the world. For generations of Columbia students like me, the ability to study simultaneously at one of the world's top political science and Asian studies centers gave us both the theoretical grounding in IR as well as the empirical background to really embark on cutting-edge scholarship on Asia. At the time I did my graduate work, I really didn't understand how rare that was and how fortunate I was to be here. Columbia students like me, supported by Weatherhead's combination of public and private funding, have gone on to become leaders not only in academia, but in the business world and in the public sector. And I'd like to point to Tom Christensen, who will speak shortly, who served as Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for East Asian and Pacific Affairs earlier in his career. And so as we can see, a small investment in Asian studies produce significant public benefits. And that is something that the government's policies will deprive current and future generations of students. At this point, I want to turn to something a little more positive, and I want to thank the Henry Luce Foundation for its steadfast support of the New York Southeast Asian Network. And I'd like to recognize Yu-Ting Lee, who is here with us today. She is the director, the Asia Program Director at Luce. Almost 10 years ago, a group of 4 of us working on Southeast Asia approached the foundation with a proposal to create a network dedicated to promoting research on and discussion about Southeast Asia through collaboration, as Hang noted, among academics, policymakers, and professionals. Today, we are a virtual hub of individual members and organizational partners that over the past decade has produced over hundreds of real-world events to expand knowledge of and resources for teaching on Southeast Asia. We've always been extremely grateful to the Luce Foundation for its support, for taking a chance on us on a very novel idea, and my colleagues, Margaret Scott and John Gershman, we all want to thank Yu-Ting and Luce for their support, particularly at this critical time in history. Now, back to the conference title, The Second Trump Administration and U.S. Southeast Asia Relations. In the aftermath of Donald Trump's election, Southeast Asian states braced for a return to the transactional America First policy of his first administration when the United States withdrew from global organizations and initiatives like the Trans-Pacific Partnership, questioned the benefits of alliances like NATO, and downgraded engagement with ASEAN. At the time, Washington also launched a trade war with Beijing, labeled China a peer competitor, and adopted an Indo-Pacific strategy that placed unwanted pressure on Southeast Asian states to choose sides. The first Trump administration also adopted coercive policies toward individual Southeast Asian states, labeling Vietnam a currency manipulator, withdrawing GSP privileges from Thailand, and threatening sanctions on states like Indonesia with large budget trade deficits with the United States. So Southeast Asian states were prepared for the Trump administration's withdrawal from the WTO and imposition of tariffs on China. However, the scope of other measures that the Trump administration has adopted has shocked Southeast Asian capitals. The dismantling of USAID threatens health, climate, and development programs throughout the region. Trump's abandonment of Ukraine, rapprochement with Putin, and the tariff war with China and the European Union have stunned observers who ask, if the United States is willing to adopt such a coercive policy toward Canada, the largest U.S. market and a NATO ally, what does that portend for more distant Southeast Asian partners? Trump's attack on the global rules-based order has triggered a crisis in transatlantic relations, but whether it will have the same effect on Southeast Asia remains to be seen, and there's many reasons to question that. Southeast Asian leaders certainly agree that the global order has been upended. The defense minister of Singapore has stated that the U.S. has changed from a liberator to a great disruptor to a landlord seeking rent. Now, not all Southeast Asian countries share Singapore's view of the U.S. as a liberator, particularly the Indo-Chinese countries who suffered tremendously from U.S. intervention in the region, but they will certainly agree that there has been extensive disruption to the global system. Southeast Asian countries, though, have never had the same faith in the U.S. security guarantee as their European partners. Non-communist Southeast Asian countries suffered their own abandonment in the wake of the Vietnam War. And as Joseph Liao, who will speak later, wrote in his excellent book, Ambivalent Engagement, Southeast Asian countries have always been worried about the U.S. commitment to the region, and they have therefore sought to hedge their bets by diversifying partnerships and reducing their dependence on the United States. Furthermore, unlike Europe, Southeast Asian states are not bound to the United States by common Western values. And indeed, the U.S. promotion of human rights and democracy has long been a source of contention in the region. And therefore, the Trump administration's jettisoning of values diplomacy is actually something that is welcome in the region. Now, it's certainly clear that Southeast Asia's trade-dependent states have prospered within a globalized trading order, and therefore the uncertainty resulting from Trump's tariff war has generated significant concern. At the same time, however, many regional states have always chafed under some of the international rules that they thought were unfair. And we see this revisionist impulse today in the trend towards BRICS membership, with Indonesia joining the organization and Malaysia, China, and Vietnam becoming partner members of BRIC. Finally, as small and medium-sized powers, Southeast Asian countries are going to be much more impacted by events in the Indo-Pacific, particularly the trajectory of U.S.-China relations. And to date, the Trump administration has not focused on that region. It's largely concentrated its attention elsewhere. Therefore, there remains critical questions as to whether the Trump administration will default to the intense Sino-U.S. competition of its first administration or attempt to strike a deal with China, either of which will impact Southeast Asia tremendously. So the Trump administration's lack of attention to Southeast Asia and the broader Indo-Pacific region to date makes this conference extremely timely and important. And I am thrilled that so many of the region's top analysts have come here today to join us. And I look forward to a very stimulating conversation. So we're going to begin the conference with a discussion of the broader regional context. And at this point, I would like to invite the speakers for the first panel, Tom Christensen, Derek Mitchell, and Ayumi Teraoka, to please come to the podium.